what happens. Okay, we're ready to go back to the PowerPoint, and now we're recording. So the purpose of this diagram is to indicate the flow of blood through the heart. So blood is returned from these veins to the right atrium, it's pumped to the right ventricle, it's pumped to the lungs, it's oxygenated, it comes back to the left atrium, and is pumped out of the left ventricle to the whole body. So study that diagram, get that straight. Okay, so the heart's in the thoracic cavity. The heart's surrounded by a parietal pericardium. So there's a three-layered sac around the heart. So you have the parietal pericardium, that's the outside wall of the heart, and you have the other part of the visceral pericardium touching the heart, and there's a cavity in between that allows for reduction of friction as the heart moves around. So take a gander at this diagram. Just make sure you look at the front heart, and you'll have pulmonary trunk to the lungs, and aorta to the body, the superior vena cava where blood is returned from the top part of the body. So you're going to have to know these chambers. If you look at an actual, whether this is a human heart, again, you have the pulmonary trunk, which pumps blood from the right ventricle to the lungs, the ascending aorta, which pumps blood from the left ventricle to the body. So study these diagrams, be able to identify the parts. Again, we look at the heart, and this is the back view of the heart. So left atrium, right atrium. So blood is returned from these veins, superior vena cava, from the top of the body and from the lower body. The right pulmonary veins, blood returns from the lungs. It's oxygenated. This is the only arteries where you have the blood oxygenated. On the left pulmonary artery going to the lungs, the right pulmonary artery that goes to the lungs to get oxygenated. The aorta takes blood from the left ventricle to the rest of the body. So the heart is mostly muscle. It has a wall, so it's surrounded by the parietal pericardium. So that's a layer, and then you have an opening, and then you have the visceral pericardium. Okay, so here's the pericardial cavity that allows the heart to beat and reduces friction. This is cardiac muscle. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So again, you look at this heart wall. The parietal means wall, outer wall, and then you have the pericardial cavity, which has the fluid in it, and then you have the epicardium, which is very, very thin tissue. Then all the rest of the heart is muscle. So note that the pericardial sac is an outside layer, a cavity, and then a very, very thin visceral pericardium touching the heart. The heart wall is muscle. It beats. Thank the Almighty, I thank evolution, but take care of your heart. I've had to take care of mine lately. I had fluid on my heart, and on January 6th, I had to have the fluid removed by putting a window in my pericardium. They put a window in my pericardial sac. This is heart muscle. It's striated, means that it has lines that cross the short axis. There are nuclei, and it is branched, and these intercalated discs allow electrical current to flow very quickly from cell to cell. So intercalated disc is a special junction between heart cells, and since the heart beats as a unit, this is an electrical synapse. Look at another diagram of the heart. You can see that cardiac cells are branched, and that they are a long axis. The intercalated disc is a gap junction. The electrical activity of the muscle flows through these gap junctions called intercalated disc. There are nuclei in cardiac muscle. The only thing cardiac muscle does is beat. So if you cut the heart from top to bottom, and cut through the aorta and the ventricles and so on, just know all these functions, know about the valves, and there'll be questions on WebAssign. So the valves of the heart. So the left AV bicuspid separates the left ventricle and the left atrium. The right ventricular valve separates the right atrium from the right ventricle. The aortic semilunar can make sure blood goes into the aorta and does not come back. The pulmonary semilunar valve makes sure the blood pumped into the pulmonary artery keeps going on its way to the lungs and does not fall back into the right ventricle. So this is the left side of the heart, and you can see the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve, this one's called the tricuspid, this one's called the bicuspid. So the valves, these atrioventricular valves, the tricuspid and the bicuspid, separate the atrium from the ventricles. So in order for the heart to function as a double pump, because it has a right side that pumps to the lungs and a left side that pumps to the body, and these are going on with every beat, it's a double pump. Pump to the lungs, the blood comes back from the lungs and pumps to the body from the left ventricle. Again, we have another view of the heart, of the valves. The bicuspid separates the left chambers of the heart. The right separates the right atrial ventricular valve. Notice it has 3 lobes. That's why it's called the tricuspid. So here we have again the left atrium where blood returns from the lungs and is pumped into the left ventricle that pumps blood through the aortic semilunar valve, and that takes blood to all of the body parts. Again, another view of the heart. You'll have questions in WebAssign. Notice that the aorta is coming from the left ventricle. The pulmonary trunk is coming from the right. The aortic arch carries blood to all of the body. The pulmonary trunk carries blood to the lungs. The superior vena cava returns blood from the top of the heart to the right atrium. So the heart is a double pump. Right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs. Left ventricle pumps blood to all of the body parts. The coronary circulation is very important. I'm not going to ask to name these vesicles, but you need to know all of the heart parts. The heart is very, very active, so it needs a lot of oxygen. It needs a lot of oxygen. Okay, let's keep going. Each heart muscle has an electrical depolarization, a change in voltage from -90 to +30, and it has a very long refractory period so that your heart can beat and then relax. Beat and then relax. That's why this is different from a nerve action potential. Okay, that's just what I'm saying, a nerve action potential, cardiac muscle. So in skeletal muscle, you have a very, very quick contraction that can happen many, many times in a short amount of time. Otherwise, in the heart, you want a long refractory period, a long action potential, so the heart can beat and relax. Okay, so let's go back here and stop recording. Stop recording. Stop recording.